Hello there. Hope you're having a good one. Probably wondering, who is this guy on your screen right now? Well, I'm that BKO guy that you may or may not have been watching for a little while now. I've dabbled in some animations and random garbage edits and whatnot. If you're wondering, where's my Telos Gmod animations? They're coming. They are. There is a Gmod video in the works right now. I've got it maybe 1/3 done. It's going to take a long time. But look, I am going to give you some context for this video. Because it really needs it. And there's no other way I can do this without me sitting here in front of a camera and telling you. I don't like being in front of a camera. Don't expect this in the future. This is my first interview pretty much ever, so expect a lot of mistakes. I only had access to one microphone, so I had to go off the camera mic, so it might sound a little funny. I really did try to patch it up as best as I could, but we're just gonna live with it. I'm sorry. This is an interview with my great-grandfather, and this will focus more on growing up aspects in the United States during the later half of World War II. And this is from someone that grew up on the Eastern Shore of Maryland with that kind of bias towards this. So going into this video, I will warn you that after around 25 minutes my camera shut off. So we filmed 2 parts, and around 25 minutes it will go to that next part, and then the video will eventually wrap up. There is no music added to this, but if you want your lo-fi hip-hop beats or whatever, something a little bit more ambient focused, you can. It does add to the experience, but if you don't want any background noise or anything, it's there. It's complete silence the whole way through pretty much. There were some cars going by, but there's no music, nothing. So, but that might be recommended to the viewing experience. Just throwing that out there. All the credits for the pictures and music that I used will be in the description too, so please make sure to check that out, and we'll get right into the video. Peace. So hello, Pop. How's it hanging?
Hello, Brandon. How are you today?
Good. I'm here sipping my Dr. Pepper here, and today I'm gonna ask you some questions.
Okay.
Is that alright with you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess jumping right into it, we're going into the deep end kind of already. Your early childhood was during World War II.
Yes.
So I'm guessing the people watching and stuff are wondering how the war really affected your life. So, were you going to school? I guess can you remember school?
I can remember, yes, I remember the first grade. I remember just before that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember laying down in the driveway. I was probably 4, close to 5, and playing with my cars and trucks in the driveway and in the dirt, and the car was in the driveway, and we had a fenced-in yard back there, and I remember that. I remember going to school later. I remember.
How was that affected by the war? You going to school?
Okay, 1 minute. Can I backtrack?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, I can remember when I was laying down playing, and the car was in the driveway, seeing the half-moon covers over the headlights, and that kept as I learned later, the glare from shining up in the air at night.
Oh, okay.
So if enemy planes come over,
Uh-huh.
it didn't shine up and they could pinpoint where you were.
That's really cool.
So
I can't imagine doing that now, you know. I guess you couldn't really.
no,
Modern cars.
everybody had them.
Mhm.
It was
I guess you had to.
yeah, they were chrome, and anybody could put them on. You know, you didn't have to have a mechanic. And then
So that was the first thing that you remember.
that's the first thing I remember.
Mhm.
And then I remember going to school, and the first grade, the siren went off.
Siren went off.
Yeah, sometime in the afternoon, I want to say, early afternoon. And it was as I was to learn, air raid siren. It was different. If you had just a siren, like a fire siren, people wouldn't probably pay that much attention because it was normal have a fire.
Yeah.
So the siren went off, and as I can remember, it was a wailing sound. It was like you hear on TV during a war picture, and it was frightening to a degree to little people. And
Yeah, I think so.
then the teacher would get us up, march us out back to the back door, on down the steps, out in the playground, and to the backyard of the playground underneath of a big tree. And there were 6 grades. So I guess they figured that the planes, if they came over, wouldn't see the kids.
Yeah.
Well, that's funny because you got 6th grade, probably 200 kids, and they would see that.
Yeah, no.
And they were playing.
Oh, and they were just playing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was fun time. And
I guess you're young. You don't really think that, you know, this is a...
no, you don't take that serious.
No.
No.
Yeah, I could see that.
And after the first one, nothing happened, you know. And
Yeah.
then there was the siren went off for all clear.
Okay.
It wasn't just the first siren that went off wasn't just one siren. It was up and down, up and down. And then after so many, it quit.
For the all clear.
And then all clear, it rang one time, as I remember.
Okay, interesting.
The second thing I remember is being in the house in the summertime, and my father worked in construction in Baltimore. He was a bricklayer and a plasterer, and he worked for Consolidated Engineering Company and helped build big buildings for the war effort, like the Davison Chemical Company building and whatever. And he was
a bricklayer?
He was a bricklayer.
Okay.
And a good one, very good one, as I was to learn later. And he came home on weekends. Did not like living in the city.
Really?
He stayed with his aunt up there, or cousin, and her husband. He was a Baltimore City cop, and on the beat, and they had a son who joined up in the Marines as soon as the war started, and he in January, as I remember, and
wow,
he told us, and his father told us, that when he went to train, they didn't have any guns. They just had makeshift wooden guns.
They didn't have any guns?
No guns. No, never shot a rifle, until he got overseas. First live round he ever shot was overseas. And so
We're pretty desperate then.
we were real desperate. We were in bad shape. People don't realize people didn't want to go to war, and they wailed and had a fit about it. But finally, the Japanese bombed us in Pearl Harbor, and we had to go to war.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what took us into war. Then he was trained, and he got to be a drill instructor.
The
Train the other recruits.
what was that? Their son?
The son.
The son. Okay.
Yeah, he was the son, and that was, he said, all forms of military life. Climbing ropes and whatever, and jumping out of airplanes, parachute.
Oh wow.
And that's what he did. But Daddy came home on weekends, and he rode in a carpool.
Okay.
Because there was a lot of people from Cambridge that worked there, at one job or another.
In Baltimore?
In Baltimore. They either worked in the, they worked in most of the construction trades. They were bricklayers, carpenters. Most of them were carpenters. And probably steel workers, some of them. He did not like that living up there, but he lived up there during the war. And then they sent him over to where Patuxent Naval Air Station is now. It was Cedar Point then, and they built it up into this Patuxent Naval Air Station. And the Patuxent was made for planes, for trained pilots.
So he helped build the air base.
The air base.
Okay.
Because he said that I guess the first things they built was sewers.
Really?
And they were big, he said, and elaborate. He said you could drive a truck through them.
Holy crap.
And there was 8 or 10 of them down there in a gang building these sewers.
Wow.
That
was a large-scale operation.
It was a large-scale operation. And Patuxent is still there.
Whoa.
Now, he came home. When he came home, he didn't always go back with the regular crowd, because it took a very good while to get to Baltimore, because you had to go across the ferry. And you had to wait for her to come in, and you had to be in a long line most time, and you had to have stamps to get gas. And they all had to hand in some stamps. Money didn't matter. It was the stamps that you had to have for gasoline, for anything.
Yeah, when I was researching a little bit for this video, and I saw that. How did that work?
Well, you had to have so many. You were only allotted so much gasoline for so many stamps.
Okay.
And I don't know what that was, but it wasn't much. I remember home hardly ever seeing a car come up down the street.
I guess so, yeah.
People just didn't ride around because they didn't have the money. I mean, the gas.
Get the gas, yeah.
Yeah, and everything was like that. You went to the store, so on certain items you could get, and you had to have stamp. The first thing the man wanted to know when you bought stuff, if you had stamps.
So do you remember using these stamps?
Oh, yes. I remember using a stamp. My mother got some meat, and she had to have stamps first, and I wanted to give them to the butcher over the meat counter. And the butcher had to reach way over, because I was little.
Wow.
And take these stamps from me. And then she had to pay for it. and she could only get so much meat. It's not, she couldn't get what she wanted. She just got so much. Now, I remember her getting chickens, and the chickens, I guess for Sunday dinner, the grocer, he went around behind, out the back door and to the chicken coop and got the chicken and tied his legs up and brought him out to us. My mother held the chicken by the legs, and he hung down, and she took him home. And that's how we had Sunday dinner.
We don't do that now.
We don't do that now at all.
No.
And then she had to chop his head off.
Oh.
And that wasn't any problem to her. She got used to it, I guess. I didn't like it.
I guess, yeah, that was the only way back then.
That's the only way. And then she had to put him in a boiling pot of water to take the feathers off. Mm-hmm. Not a good process, but you had to do it.
Yeah, you do what you had to do back then.
Now, we also had a chicken house in the backyard. Yeah. And it was only 2 blocks over from the yacht club, 2 streets over from the yacht club. It was only half of a block from the water to us. We were the first full block. And that I remember. And a lot of the men were, all the men you saw mainly were older men that were exempt from the draft back then. And they were watermen, which was also in the food chain. They didn't have to worry about stamps and gas. They could get what they needed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But anybody else was in service.
Yeah, I guess so.
Now, my father, I think he said when the war was over, he was 34 days from being drafted. Scared to death.
Holy crap.
Yes. And, but at night, I remember one night, must have been in the summer, and this siren went off. Mm-hmm. And my mother quickly run and pulled all the shades down, and the curtains had to cover the whole window. Sides of the shades, front of it.
For what?
Couldn't see no light. So if an airplane come over, he couldn't see any light down there.
Whoa. Okay.
And if he did, I guess it was an air raid warden, because he come down our street and knocked on the door, and he kind of blessed Mom out because he could see a little bit of light around her windows.
Oh, man.
And she had to hurry up and get up there and cover that up. And we only had one light on in the room where we were.
Wow.
And because that's the way it was. You didn't have many lights in the room. And if you were in that room, you had that light on. Of course, you didn't have television, you had a radio.
Yeah, back then, yeah.
Yeah, so
back then, I guess that kind of ties into, I was reading about, that was one thing that the community was doing. They were enforcing that there wasn't any light at night. And when I was researching this, I saw that some towns had plane watchers where they would look out for airplanes.
Yes.
Did you see any of that?
I saw it after the war. Well, I guess I saw it during the war. On Hooper's Island, they had one, a little building. It was maybe 4 or 5 feet square. Mm-hmm. And maybe 10 or 12 feet high, and the roof of it was glass, triangular, and they would go ahead, and there was a shift of people, and they had airplane
Like pictures of them.
pictures of them,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd been given by the military. And if they saw one that come over that looked anything like that, they had a number to call, and that's who they did.
Really?
Yes, and that's how they worked it in the country. Now, I don't know that they had that in the city at all.
Probably.
Could be,
Yeah.
in some form or another. They had also boats that were commandeered by yachts out of the harbor at Cambridge, and they went out, the Coast Guard took them and put a crew on them, and they patrolled up down the Choptank River and out into the bay
Wow.
to see if they saw any submarines or saboteurs, because at one point they did have some saboteurs, I think up around New York, that were landed out on the beach.
Really?
Yeah, and they finally caught them, but they had that. So you were worried to death. You know, you were scared of what was going on because you didn't really know that much.
No.
No,
It was just the newspapers.
that's right, and the radio.
And the radio, yeah. And
The radio was very informative at them days. It told you everything that they knew.
yeah.
It was some of them announcers had bodyguards.
Bodyguard?
Bodyguards, because they would tell things that people didn't want them to tell, and
That sounds better than today.
yes, it is. Yes, it was. And but that's the siren when it went off was an awful sound, because you knew then that something was up, or as a little fella you thought so. Now there were certain people that you saw, and that was the Iceman. He come down, and because some people didn't have refrigerators, had ice boxes, and the ice boxes were served by the local ice company, who come down the street in a flatbed truck with the sides and tarp on top, and the man got out. He was an older man. He would use a ice pick, and he'd pick you up whatever you had on that little card on the door.
Mm-hmm.
A pound, 2 pound, 5 pound, whatever. And he would take it to your door, you would pay him. I saw them, and they were nice in the summer, because while he was at somebody's house, you went there on his truck and got all them little shavings of ice from that ice pick.
Wow.
Yeah, and all the kids liked that. And you saw the gas man and the water company, where they had breaks or something, and they had to come and dig the street up to get the pipes fixed.
Mm-hmm.
But there was not a lot of men around. A lot of women, but not a lot of men.
Yeah, they were all towards
Yeah.
the war.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember that we had Phillips Packing Company in town, and Phillips Packing Company, they were in all towns just about, but they were big in Cambridge. They had, they were the biggest pack concern in the United States.
Phillips Packing Company.
Phillips Packing Company, and Phillips Delicious, and they put up stuff for the war effort. Everything they had just about went to the war effort. Not everything, but most things. And they had vehicles. They had a lot of vehicles.
They were able to get them.
They were able to get them, and they had no problem. But everybody worked there had a problem getting back and forth to work. They either carried their lunch, or they rode a bicycle, or they walked.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing a lot of people that lived 2 miles away, riding the bicycle
Yeah.
back and forth.
Because you couldn't get gas.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, they employed a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because it was they had.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello there. You might wonder why everything looks different. Well, our cameras cut out after I bought these cameras new for this video. They cut off after around 25 minutes or something. I didn't know these cameras would do that. After like 25 minutes they would shut off, so that's really annoying. It's probably a setting or something, so apologies for that. And apologies for the lighting. It's currently like this foggy, groggy, rainy day, but we'll survive, won't we, Pop?
We'll survive.
Yeah, we'll prevail. We're troopers. So this second part of the video is just going to cover some points that we wanted to make sure that were really drilled home, to make sure that we didn't forget, basically, because we're both very forgetful people. And then that will pretty much be the end of the video. So enjoy. So one of the things that we wanted to go over was you talked to me how they had repair kits. Let's take a step back. So pots and pans and other metals were towards the effort for World War II. They needed metal for machine guns and whatever, tanks.
Yes.
And one of the ways that they got metal was if you had leftover scrap, a man would come around and collect that. Am I right?
That's right. Exactly right.
And you said that for pots and pans, because you didn't want to give away all your pots and pans. You needed to cook and whatever. But when they would go bad, you couldn't get new pots and pans.
That's exactly right. They had a repair kit. Mm-hmm. I remember my mother going to the store, I think the dime store, 5-10 cent store, and getting a repair kit. And the repair kit consisted of a bolt, a little bolt, on a nut, and 2 washers, a metal one and a rubber type one. Might be neoprene, I don't know. Anyhow, that's how you repaired it, and you could go on for a regular while till it got bigger. The hole got bigger, and you get a bigger one. But after a while, hopefully, time come around, you could get stamps to get a new one.
Okay.
And then when the junk man come around in his truck, I remember some of them a horse and wagon, and they collected that junk, and he would holler going up and down the street, and mother would go out there and give him that pot and pan. And they collected rags and newspapers.
So they collected many materials.
And whatever they could reuse in the war effort, one way or the other, either for domestic use or the war effort.
So that was point number 1 that we wanted to get across, that we wanted to make sure that we didn't forget. That just really goes to show how desperate we really were for materials.
We were very dead. We didn't have anything. We had give everything away. The Japanese had bought all of our scrap metal uh, during the war overseas, and before we got in the war, and we had sold them everything, and
How ironic.
lo and behold, they bombed us, and we had no scrap metal.
Yeah.
So you had to get it the best way you could, and make do, renew, whatever.
Number 2 was, so we had, I think we touched on this in the video a little bit, but just to make sure, you saw prisoner of war camps in your hometown.
Yes, I did. It used to be the fairground. It was at the edge of town, and in carrying my father, so evidently it was a Sunday afternoon, and we were carrying him down to the waterman, down to the islands to go back. You paid him a fee, the waterman, and of course he could get plenty of gas, and he was in the food chain, and he would take 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, and he'd take you across the bay, and in a half hour you were over, 45 minutes you were over there to go to work. So you didn't have to go up and across the bay on the ferry and in your car and all that. You cut out a lot of time.
So this was going, if I haven't said this already, this is on the eastern part of Maryland. So this would be connecting to the main part.
Eastern shore connecting the Chesapeake Bay. You had to go across to the western shore.
Okay. And so this was before the Bay Bridge and
all that.
So you had to go somewhere else and get on a ferry.
Yeah. It's close to the Bay Bridge now. Very close. And you had about 4 or 5 ferries. And they were going and coming all the time, but they didn't carry many cars. And you have a backlog of 100 cars. Took you a while to get across there. But let me get back to my original thought.
Yeah.
In going down there that day, we had to stop at a stop sign going out of town at the fairground. And I was standing up on the seat because I was little, and I was on the back seat standing up looking.
In the boat?
No, in the car.
In the car.
We were still in the car, and there was a prisoner of war camp with a fence around it, and some guard, and 2 blonde-haired boys, light-haired boys, playing ball, and another one standing there waiting, and then we went on. So we had them, and they helped the farmers. Farmers could come get them. There was one in prisoner of war camp, I think, outside Hurlock. Yeah. And the farmers would get them and take them, and they were just glad to have something to do other than stand around in that prisoner of war camp.
Yeah.
Doing nothing and get boring. And they could do things and didn't jeopardize nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's that part I remember.
That was point number 2. And our last and most special point. Buckle up, Pop. This is a question for the ages. Okay?
Okay.
Are you ready? You remember video games, right? You remember, like, I would go into GameStop and buy some games.
I remember that.
For my Xbox 360. Okay. Would you rather have unlimited bacon but no more video games, or games, unlimited video games but no games? Thank you for watching. Wave to the camera goodbye, Pop. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.